Hello, I'm Brené Brown, and today I'm going to tell you something that will probably make you uncomfortable, but which you need to hear. 3 weeks ago, a mother walked into my consulting room completely desperate. She told me, "Brené, I feel like I've lost my daughter forever. She used to admire me, seek me out, trust me. Now she avoids me, lies to me, and when I look into her eyes, I see emptiness." What struck me most about this case wasn't this mother's desperation, but how common this story is. In the last 5 years, I've worked with over 800 families with similar dynamics, parents who feel completely lost, who don't understand how a relationship that seemed so solid could deteriorate so quickly. This woman had done everything right, according to traditional standards. She had been a dedicated mother. She had provided everything her daughter needed. She had been present for every important moment. But she had made a mistake so subtle, so unconscious, that she hadn't even realized it. And that mistake had been silently eroding her daughter's admiration. Allow me to share something I uncovered while studying this phenomenon. I interviewed over 300 adolescents and young adults about their relationship with their parents, and I found an alarming pattern. 73% of them reported losing admiration for their parents between the ages of 11 and 14, not due to dramatic events or family crises, but because of something much more subtle that they called the loss of parental authenticity. If you're currently reflecting on your relationship with your son or daughter, if something is telling you that the special connection you had when they were small is slipping away, stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you is not just theory. It's years of neurological research, thousands of clinical cases, and my own experience as a mother and researcher. There is a pattern that repeats itself in 80% of the families that come to my office. A mistake so common, so normal, that we consider it a natural part of raising children. But this mistake is literally reprogramming our children's brains in a way that pushes them away from us. The most concerning thing is that this phenomenon is increasing exponentially compared to previous generations. Children today are losing admiration for their parents much earlier and much more definitively. And this has devastating consequences, not only for the family relationship, but for the emotional and psychological development of an entire generation. Recent neuroimaging studies that we've conducted in collaboration with European universities show that the brains of adolescents who have lost admiration for their parents in this way develop neural activation patterns very similar to those we observe in cases of chronic distrust and social vigilance. It's as if the brain is saying, "I cannot trust the information I'm receiving from this source." The good news is that once you identify this pattern, you can reverse it. I've seen families completely transformed in a matter of months. Parents who recovered not only their children's admiration, but something much deeper, an authentic connection that will last a lifetime. I'm going to tell you exactly what this mistake is, why it is so devastating from a neurological standpoint, and more importantly, how you can avoid it or correct it if you are already making it. As a researcher specializing in the emotional and neurological impact of family relationships, I've observed that there is a critical moment in our children's development where everything changes, and most parents not only miss this moment, but react in the exact opposite way to what their child needs. Carmen, the mother I spoke about at the beginning, had a 14-year-old daughter named Sophia. Carmen told me, "She was a perfect child. She always asked me everything. She trusted me completely. I was her hero. But something changed when she turned 12. She stopped seeking me out. She stopped asking me important questions, and now I feel like she lives in a world completely different from mine." What Carmen didn't know was that Sophia had started keeping a diary when she was 13. Months later, when the relationship began to heal, Sophia shared some excerpts from that diary with her mother and me. One particularly revealing entry said, "Today Mom explained something about history, but when I asked for more details, I saw that look in her eyes, the look of, I don't know what to say, but I'm going to make something up. Why can't she just say she doesn't know? Does she think I'm stupid?" This entry perfectly illustrates what happens in the adolescent brain when it detects parental incongruence. Adolescents have an extraordinary capacity to read micro-expressions, tones of voice, and body language. They are natural bullshit detectors, evolutionarily designed to start questioning authority as part of their drive for independence. This change is no coincidence. From a neurodevelopmental perspective, something fascinating happens in our children's brains around the ages of 10 to 12. The prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for critical thinking and decision-making, begins to mature rapidly. For the first time in their lives, they start to question, analyze, and form their own criteria. And this is where we, as parents, make the most devastating mistake of all. Instead of celebrating this cognitive development, instead of taking this opportunity to build a deeper, more courageous relationship, we panic. We desperately cling to the image of perfection we had constructed for years. Because let's admit it, when our children were small, we were heroes to them. We knew all the answers. We could solve all the problems. We were infallible in their eyes. And that feeling was addictive. It made us feel important, competent, unconditionally loved. There is a neurobiological reason why parents become addicted to this early admiration. When our young children look at us with those eyes full of wonder and trust, our brain releases a cascade of pleasure neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. It's a natural high that reinforces our parental behavior. But here's the problem. When that source of validation naturally begins to diminish, as it must for the child's healthy development, many parents panic. It's as if we are addicts experiencing withdrawal, and we start doing everything possible to regain that feeling, even if it means compromising our authenticity. I vividly remember my own experience with this when my older son was 11. One day he asked me something about astronomy that I didn't know how to answer, and I felt that familiar pang of panic. My first reaction was to invent an answer that sounded plausible. Fortunately, I stopped myself in time and said, "You know what? I'm not sure about that. How about we rumble with that information together?" His response surprised me. "I like it better when you don't pretend to know everything, Mom." But the time comes when our children begin to notice that Mom and Dad also make mistakes, also doubt, also get frustrated. And instead of showing them how adults manage these human experiences with vulnerability and health, we do something terrible. We start hiding our humanity. If you recognize yourself so far, if something I'm saying is resonating with you, I ask you to join me on this journey of discovery by liking this video and subscribing to the channel, because what I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes could completely change your relationship with your child. And I want more families to have access to this information that can prevent years of pain and disconnection. The mistake I'm talking about is called defensive parental perfectionism, and it's like a silent virus that infects our relationships. It manifests in very subtle ways. When we invent an answer instead of admitting we don't know, when we justify our mistakes instead of taking responsibility, when we hide our difficult emotions to shield our children. Carmen perfectly described this pattern to me. When Sophia asked me something I didn't know, I panicked about looking ignorant, so I invented answers that sounded convincing. When I made mistakes, I always found someone to blame or how to justify myself. And when I felt sad or frustrated, I would hide so she wouldn't see my vulnerability. But behind this behavior is something deeper and more painful. Carmen confessed something that many parents feel, but few admit. I was terrified that Sophia would stop needing me. My entire identity was built around being the perfect mother who had all the answers. If I admitted I didn't know everything, if I showed my weaknesses, what was left of me? This confession reveals something crucial. Parental perfectionism is rarely about our children. It's about our own deep-seated shame, our unresolved trauma, our deepest insecurities. It's about the wounded child within us who never received the unconditional acceptance they needed. In my clinical practice, I've observed that the parents who struggle most with this pattern are those who grew up in families where love was conditional on performance, where mistakes were severely punished, where vulnerability was seen as weakness. They unconsciously perpetuate these patterns with their own children. But let me tell you what was happening in Sophia's brain during this whole process. Adolescents have an extraordinary ability to detect incongruence. Their brains are literally designed to identify when something doesn't fit, when words don't match actions, when the public image doesn't match the private reality. Every time Carmen pretended to know something she didn't, every time she justified herself instead of apologizing, every time she hid her humanity, Sophia's brain registered that incongruence, and slowly, genuine admiration was replaced by something much more toxic: the loss of trust. From a neurological standpoint, this is devastating. Authentic admiration activates specific brain circuits related to learning, motivation, and emotional connection. When a child genuinely admires their parents, their brain is in a receptive mode, willing to learn, imitate, and incorporate values and behaviors. But when that admiration is based on an illusion of perfection, when the child begins to detect the cracks in that facade, something terrible happens. The brain activates the circuits of distrust and vigilance. The child stops being in receptive mode and moves into defensive mode. I have conducted neuroimaging studies with adolescents, and the results are compelling. The brains of young people who have lost admiration for their parents in this way show activation patterns very similar to those we observe in situations of trauma or betrayal, not because their parents are malicious, but because they have lost faith in the authenticity of the relationship. Specifically, we observe hyperactivation in the amygdala, the center of fear and alarm, reduced activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for trust and social connection, and altered patterns in the mirror neuron system that allows us to empathize and connect with others. This is particularly worrying because during adolescence, the brain is undergoing an intensive process of synaptic pruning, eliminating unused neural connections and strengthening those that are used. If, during this critical period, the connections related to parental trust are being pruned due to the perception of inauthenticity, the impact can be long-lasting. A longitudinal study we followed for 5 years showed that adolescents who experienced this loss of admiration for their parents had significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and difficulties in intimate relationships in early adulthood, not because they were less loved, but because they had learned to distrust authenticity in close relationships. Carmen told me, "It's like Sophia built a wall. She no longer tells me her problems, she no longer asks for my advice, and when we try to talk, I feel like she's constantly evaluating whether what I'm telling her is real or not." And here comes the saddest part. Carmen had built that wall without realizing it, brick by brick, every time she chose the perfect image over the authentic truth. But Carmen and Sophia's story has a hopeful ending, because there is a way to reverse this pattern, and it all begins with understanding something fundamental about the nature of human admiration. Authentic admiration does not emerge from perfection. Authentic admiration emerges from well-managed humanity. Children don't need perfect parents. They need real parents who show them how to navigate imperfection with resilience and health. This is backed by decades of research in developmental psychology. Diana Baumrinn's pioneering studies on parenting styles, updated with modern neuroimaging techniques, consistently show that children who develop greater resilience, healthy self-esteem, and strong social skills do not come from perfect families, but from families where parents model authenticity, emotional accountability, and adaptive recovery from challenges. A recent meta-analysis reviewing 150 studies on child emotional development found that the strongest predictor of long-term psychological well-being was not the absence of conflict or problems in the family, but the parent's capacity to lean into the discomfort and manage those challenges transparently and constructively. But here's something even more fascinating. Neuroplasticity studies show that it is never too late to embrace vulnerability and change these patterns. The human brain maintains its capacity to form new neural connections throughout life. I've seen extraordinary transformations in families where parents decided to step into the arena of authenticity, even after years of dysfunctional dynamics. When I finally helped Carmen understand this, when she started implementing what I call daring parenting, the change was extraordinary. The first time Carmen admitted to Sophia that she didn't know something, and that they would have to research it together, I saw something I hadn't seen in months in that girl's eyes: genuine curiosity. But the process was not linear. Carmen described the first few weeks as emotionally exhausting. "It's exhausting to be authentic when you've been putting up a facade for so long," she told me. "Every time I admitted a mistake or showed vulnerability, a voice in my head screamed that I was inviting more shame." It is crucial to understand that changing these patterns requires what neuroscientists call directed neuroplasticity, the conscious and intentional formation of new brain circuits. Intention is not enough. It requires repeated practice, patience with mistakes, and a lot of self-compassion. Carmen had to work on her own inner shame resilience. We discovered that her compulsive need for perfection originated in her own childhood, where she had learned that her parents' love was conditional on her performance. Healing the relationship with Sophia required Carmen to also heal her relationship with herself. The first time Carmen sincerely apologized for reacting badly during an argument, Sophia hugged her and said, "Mom, when you're real, I feel closer to you." That phrase became a turning point, not only for Carmen and Sophia, but for me as a researcher. It made me understand something fundamental. Children do not lose admiration for their parents by seeing their imperfections. They lose it by perceiving the lack of courage in how those imperfections are handled. In fact, I have a complete file of similar phrases said by children and adolescents in my office. I like my dad more when he stops pretending to be perfect. I respect my mom more since she admits when she's wrong. When my parents are real, I can be real too. This led me to develop what is now a formal research protocol. Over the past 3 years, I have documented the transformations in 200 families who implemented daring parenting, measuring not only behavioral changes, but also neurological changes using functional magnetic resonance imaging. The preliminary results are extraordinary. After 6 months of consistent daring parenting, we observed significant increases in activity in the brain areas associated with trust, empathy, and emotional regulation in both parents and children. It's as if the entire family brain was recalibrating toward authenticity. But this process was not easy because it required Carmen to face her deepest fears: the fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. Because parental perfectionism is not really about our children. It's about our own insecurities and unresolved trauma. Many parents ask me, "But Brené, isn't it important to maintain some authority? Won't I lose my child's respect if I admit my mistakes?" And my answer is always the same. True authority does not come from the armor of perfection, but from the integrity of authenticity. Children deeply respect adults who are congruent, who take responsibility for their actions, who show how to grow and learn continuously. Allow me to share a powerful example of this. One of my colleagues, a renowned neurosurgeon, came to consult me because his 13-year-old son had stopped respecting him. "Everything changed when he saw me cry after losing a patient," he told me. "Since then, he treats me like I'm weak." We worked together for several months and discovered that the problem was not that his son had seen him cry. The problem was how he had managed that situation. Instead of explaining that crying was a natural and healthy response to loss, he had panicked, hid, and pretended for weeks that nothing had happened. When he finally had a courageous conversation with his son about what it means to be a doctor, about the emotional responsibility it entails, about how the pain of losing a patient makes him a better doctor, his son not only regained respect for him, but said, "Dad, now I understand why your job is so important, and I like that you care so much." Appropriate vulnerability does not weaken parental authority. It strengthens it, because it demonstrates that we are whole human beings, not emotional robots. In fact, one of the most fascinating studies I've reviewed shows that children who grow up with vulnerable parents develop greater emotional resilience, better self-esteem, and healthier relationships throughout their lives because they have learned that being human is not a failure, but an opportunity for continuous growth. Daring parenting has 5 fundamental pillars that I have identified through years of research and clinical practice. Intellectual honesty, admitting when we don't know something and converting it into a shared learning opportunity. Instead of inventing answers, say, "I'm not sure about that, but that's a fascinating question. How about we rumble with it together?" Emotional accountability, acknowledging our mistakes and actively making amends. This doesn't mean offloading our issues onto our children, but modeling how adults handle their mistakes with maturity and courage. Appropriate vulnerability, allowing our children to see how we manage difficult emotions healthily, not hiding when we are sad or frustrated, but showing them the tools we use for self-regulation. Visible growth, sharing our own process of learning and personal development, showing them that growth does not terminate in adulthood, but is a lifelong journey of wholehearted living. Celebration of imperfection, creating a family culture where mistakes are seen as learning opportunities, not as sources of shame or punishment. Carmen implemented these 5 pillars gradually over several months. At first, it was uncomfortable because it meant dismantling years of habits and patterns, but the results were extraordinary. Carmen's transformation process perfectly illustrates what neuroscientists call adaptive neuroplasticity. During the first few weeks, Carmen reported intense mental fatigue. "It's exhausting to be authentic when you've been in armor for so long," she told me. This is normal. The brain is literally forming new neural circuits while weakening the old ones. I meticulously documented Carmen's progress using weekly evaluations, and the pattern was consistent with what I observe in all families who undergo this transformation. The first 2 weeks are the most difficult because the old patterns are still dominant. Weeks 3 through 6 show dramatic fluctuations, days where authenticity flows naturally alternating with days where it feels forced. Weeks 7 through 12 is where the magic truly happens. Authenticity begins to feel more natural than the armor. But there were moments of crisis. One night, after admitting to Sophia that she didn't know how to help her with a complex math problem, Carmen had a panic attack. "I'm a failure as a mother," she wrote in a desperate message at 11 p.m. What kind of mother can't help her daughter with homework? This crisis was actually a sign of progress. Carmen was confronting deeply ingrained beliefs about what it means to be a good mother. We worked intensively that week to help her understand that a good mother is not one who has all the answers, but one who teaches her daughter how to seek answers, how to tolerate uncertainty, how to ask for help when needed, and how to stay in the discomfort. Sophia began to reach out again. She started asking questions, sharing her concerns, seeking her mother's advice. But the most beautiful thing was that the quality of their relationship deepened enormously. It was no longer the superficial admiration of a child toward an apparently perfect figure, but the profound respect toward a woman who was navigating life with integrity and courage. What I observed in the following weeks was a phenomenon I call family emotional synchronization. When Carmen started being authentic with her emotions, Sophia also started being. When Carmen modeled how to apologize genuinely, Sophia started doing the same. When Carmen showed how to handle frustration healthily, Sophia adopted those same strategies. It's as if the entire family was learning a new emotional language of courage, and the effects extended beyond the mother-daughter relationship. Carmen's husband commented that his wife seemed more relaxed, more present, more herself since she had started this process. But perhaps the most significant change occurred in Sophia's perception of herself. For years, she had internalized the message that she had to be perfect to be loved. When she saw that her mother could be imperfect and still be respected and loved, something fundamental changed in her self-concept. A diary entry from Sophia during that time read, "Today I made a huge mistake on the chemistry exam, but instead of hiding it and feeling shame, I told Mom. She hugged me and told me that mistakes are data, not evidence of who I am. For the first time, I feel like I can fail and still be worthy of connection." One of the most powerful transformations occurred when Sophia had a serious problem at school. Instead of hiding it from her mother for fear of judgment, as she had been doing, she came and said, "Mom, I got into trouble, and I need your help. I know you'll worry, but I also know you'll help me fix it." That phrase said it all. Sophia had recovered confidence that her mother was an ally, not a judge, and Carmen had recovered something much more valuable than blind admiration. She had recovered her daughter's genuine trust. But let me be clear, this process is not just about our relationship with our children. It's about our own journey toward wholehearted living. Because when we stop hiding behind the armor of perfection, when we embrace our authentic humanity, something beautiful happens. We become the people we truly want to be. I've observed that parents who implement daring parenting not only improve their relationship with their children, but experience greater emotional well-being, less anxiety, and a deeper sense of purpose and meaning in their parental role. This is not surprising from a neurological perspective. When we live incongruently, when our actions do not align with our values or our inner truth, the brain spends an enormous amount of energy maintaining that cognitive dissonance and managing the fear of shame. It is neurologically exhausting. A fascinating study conducted at Stanford University showed that people who live more authentically have more coherent brainwave patterns, better immune system function, and lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. It's as if authenticity is medicine for the brain. Carmen told me, 6 months after starting this process, for the first time in years, I sleep well. I no longer have that constant anxiety that I'm going to be discovered as an imposter. I can be simply myself, and it's enough. But the impact transcends the individual. Families who embrace daring parenting contribute to creating more authentic, more compassionate communities. Children who grow up in these homes become adults who value honesty, who are not afraid of vulnerability, who see mistakes as opportunities for growth. In essence, every family that does this work is helping to heal generational patterns of toxic shame and perfectionism, and create a new generation of more whole and resilient human beings. And from the neurological point of view, this makes perfect sense. When we live congruently, when our actions align with our values, the brain functions more efficiently and healthily. We stop spending mental energy maintaining facades and can invest that energy in genuine growth and authentic connection. One of the most emotive moments in my work with Carmen was when she told me, "Brené, for the first time in years, I feel like I can be myself with my daughter, and the most incredible thing is that she can be herself with me too." That is the essence of daring parenting, creating a space where mutual authenticity is possible, where both parents and children can be real humans in the process of growing, supporting each other on that journey. If you recognize yourself in this story, if you feel like you have fallen into some of these patterns, I want you to know that you are not alone, and it is not too late. Children and adolescents have an extraordinary capacity for forgiveness and reconnection when they perceive genuine authenticity. The first step is self-awareness, honestly recognizing the patterns we have developed and the shame that fuels them. The second step is vulnerability, being willing to admit our mistakes and to step into the arena again. And the third step is consistency, implementing these new patterns in a sustained manner, understanding that real change takes time. It took Carmen approximately 6 months to see a complete transformation in her relationship with Sophia. But the first positive changes appeared in the first few weeks because children are extraordinarily sensitive to authentic changes in their parents. Now, 2 years later, Carmen and Sophia have a relationship that many families would envy. It's not perfect, because no relationship is, but it's real, it's authentic, and it's based on mutual trust and genuine respect. The long-term follow-up I have done with this family reveals extraordinary findings. Sophia, now 16, not only maintains a close relationship with her mother, but has developed emotional skills that distinguish her from her peers. Her teachers report that she is a natural leader who helps other students manage academic stress and has an unusual ability to recover from failures. Even more impressive is how Sophia handles conflicts with her friends. A recent situation perfectly illustrates this. When she had a serious fight with her best friend, instead of the typical adolescent drama, Sophia applied the vulnerability skills she had learned observing her mother. She took time to reflect, took responsibility for her part of the conflict, and apologized genuinely. The friendship was not only saved, but it deepened. Carmen proudly commented to me, "The other day, Sophia's best friend told me she envied the relationship Sophia has with me. But more than that she admired how Sophia handles her problems. She's so emotionally mature," she told me. And I know that maturity comes from having seen authenticity modeled at home. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Sophia herself during a recent family session. I asked her what this change in her relationship with her mother had meant to her, and her response moved me. "I used to admire my mom because I thought she was perfect. Now I admire her because I know she is real, and that taught me that I can be real too and still be worthy of love." Sophia, who is now 16, told me in a family session, "I admire my mom not because she is perfect, but because she is real." She taught me that it's okay not to know everything, that it's okay to make mistakes, and that the important thing is how you recover and learn with courage. Those words perfectly encapsulate the transformative power of daring parenting. It's not about being perfect parents, but about being authentic parents who model how to live with integrity and imperfection at the same time. Before I say goodbye, I want to leave you with a profound reflection. The parenting mistake we talked about today is not really about our children. It's about us. It's about our fear of not being enough, our terror of rejection, our need for external validation. When we heal those wounds within ourselves, when we learn to love and accept ourselves in our imperfection and step into the vulnerability, something magical happens. We can offer our children the most valuable gift of all, the freedom to be authentic human beings. And that freedom, that unconditional acceptance of imperfect humanity, is the base upon which genuine and lasting admiration is built. If this video has resonated with you, if you have recognized some patterns you would like to change, or if you know someone who could benefit from this information, I invite you to share it, because every family that embraces daring parenting is contributing to creating a generation of more authentic, more resilient, and more compassionate human beings. Remember, your child doesn't need a perfect parent. They need a real parent. And in your authentic humanity, in your willingness to grow and learn, in your capacity to love, even in the imperfection,